28 men. One ship crushed by ice, no radio, no hope of rescue. Welcome to 1915, where Ernest Shackleton and his crew faced impossible odds in the most hostile place on Earth, Antarctica. For 497 days, they wouldn't touch land. Their ship would sink beneath the ice. They'd drift on floating ice islands, cross 800 miles of the world's deadliest ocean in a tiny lifeboat. And yet somehow every single man survived. This is not fiction. This is the true story of the Endurance expedition, where leadership, courage, and the unbreakable human spirit defeated death itself. Let's dive in. August 1914. While Europe plunged into World War I, Ernest Shackleton had different ambitions. The 40-year-old Irish explorer stood on the deck of his ship, the Endurance, with a dream that consumed him. To be the first person to cross Antarctica on foot, 1,800 miles of pure ice from one frozen coast to another. Men wanted for hazardous journey, his famous advertisement had read. Low wages, bitter cold, long hours of complete darkness. Safe return doubtful. Honor and recognition in event of success. 5,000 men applied. On December 5, 1914, the Endurance departed from South Georgia Island with 28 souls aboard. Scientists, sailors, a photographer named Frank Hurley, and even a stowaway 18-year-old Piers Blackborough, who'd hidden in a locker. When discovered, Shackleton told him bluntly, "If we run out of food, you'll be the first we eat." Blackborough just grinned. The ship pushed south into waters few had ever seen. Ice floated like white sculptures around them. Massive icebergs towered overhead, cathedral-sized monuments of frozen water. Captain Frank Worsley navigated expertly through the labyrinth of ice. Then on January 18, 1915, just one day's sail from their landing point, everything changed. "The ice is closing in," Worsley said, his voice tight. Shackleton looked out at the Weddell Sea. Loose ice was cementing together around them, forming an enormous white prison. The temperature had dropped to 20 degrees Fahrenheit. What had been navigable water yesterday was now solid pack ice. The Endurance was stuck. "We'll wait for the ice to break," Shackleton announced to the crew. "Keep spirits high, men, we've faced worse." But had they? Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The ship drifted helplessly, frozen in place like a fly in amber. The men established routines. They played football on the ice, held concerts, fed the 69 sled dogs they'd brought. Hurley took extraordinary photographs of the ship trapped in its white cage. February arrived. Then March, April. The Antarctic winter descended with its endless darkness. August 1st, 1915. After 8 months frozen, something changed. The ice began to move. Not gently, not kindly. The ice started to break apart and pile up, massive slabs grinding against each other with the force of continents colliding. And the Endurance sat right in the middle of this frozen battlefield. "Listen," someone whispered. The ship began to groan. Long, agonized creaks echoed through the hull as ice pressure squeezed the wooden vessel. The sound was like a living thing in pain. September came. The pressure intensified. Timbers cracked. Water began seeping through the hull. The men worked frantically to pump it out, but they were fighting a losing battle against nature's overwhelming power. October 27, 1915. Shackleton stood on deck watching calmly as the ice lifted the Endurance's stern into the air. The rudder snapped off. The keel tore away. Freezing water rushed into the ship like an invader claiming its prize. "She's going, boys," came the cry. Shackleton's voice cut through the chaos. "It's time to get off." They'd been preparing for this moment for months. The men grabbed supplies, tents, the 3 lifeboats, James Caird, Dudley Docker, and Stancomb Wills, named after their financial backers. They salvaged what food they could. Hurley went back for his photographic negatives, selecting 150 of his best images and smashing the rest so he wouldn't be tempted to carry more weight. They made camp on the ice beside their dying ship. For 25 days, the wreck of the Endurance stood like a broken monument, tilted and crushed but still visible. The men lived in tents on the ice floe, watching their only link to civilization being slowly devoured. November 24, 1915. "She's going under," someone shouted. 28 men stood silently as the Endurance convulsed one final time. The stern rose up, the bow dipped down, and then, with almost dignified grace, The ship slipped beneath the ice into the black water below. Gone. Their home. Their transport. Their safety. All of it sank into the freezing depths of the Weddell Sea nearly 10,000 feet down. Shackleton turned to his men, his face set with determination. "Ship and stores have gone," he said simply. "So now we'll go home." Home. The word seemed impossible. They were stranded on a floating island of ice in the middle of Antarctica. The nearest civilization was hundreds of miles away across the most dangerous ocean on Earth. They had no radio. No one knew where they were. No rescue was coming. 28 men, 3 small boats, the clothes on their backs and limited supplies. And Shackleton expected them to survive. The ice beneath their feet was drifting north, carrying them slowly through the frozen sea like passengers on a ship they couldn't steer. Each man knew the truth. Their ice floe could crack and dump them into freezing water at any moment. Killer whales patrolled the leads between ice chunks. Leopard seals lounged nearby, their powerful jaws capable of crushing a man. "What's the plan, boss?" asked Frank Wild, Shackleton's second-in-command. Shackleton pointed north. "We march across the ice to land. It's our only chance." They called it Ocean Camp, their new home on the ice. And so began one of history's most incredible survival journeys. But the real test hadn't even started yet. December 1915. The men of the Endurance had been living on a floating ice floe for over a month. They'd tried marching across the ice toward land, hauling their 3 boats like ancient explorers dragging ships across deserts. But the ice was chaos. Pressure ridges rose up like jagged mountain ranges some 20 feet high. Soft snow hid deadly cracks. In 7 brutal days, they'd managed just 7.5 miles. "Enough," Shackleton ordered. "We stop here." They established what they called Patience Camp. The name said everything. They were at the mercy of the ice drift, hoping it would carry them north toward open water, and eventually toward land. But patience was becoming their enemy. "How long can we last out here?" asked physicist Reginald James, watching the endless white expanse. Nobody answered. The food supply was dwindling. They'd already had to shoot some of the beloved sled dogs. There wasn't enough food for both men and animals. Each shot echoed across the ice like a small death of hope. The ice floe beneath them was shrinking too. Every day the ocean chipped away at their floating refuge. Cracks would suddenly appear, sometimes splitting right through the middle of their camp. Men would wake to find their tent had drifted 30 feet from their neighbors overnight. March 1916, 4 months at Patience Camp. The men were gaunt, their faces weathered, their spirits tested. But something was changing. The temperature was rising, the Antarctic summer was approaching, and the ice was breaking up faster. "Land!" someone shouted on April 7th. There, on the horizon, the snow-capped peaks of Clarence and Elephant Islands. Actual solid land. The sight brought tears to eyes that hadn't cried in months. But the ice had other plans. April 9th, 1916, 5 p.m. Crack! The sound was like a cannon shot. The ice floe beneath them split with tremendous force, a crevasse opening up like the earth tearing itself apart. It ran right through their camp, separating men from their supplies, dividing the group. "The boats!" Shackleton roared. "Get to the boats now!" Chaos erupted. Men scrambled across moving ice chunks, grabbing supplies, dragging the 3 precious lifeboats toward the edge. The ice floe they'd called home for months was disintegrating beneath their feet. "Launch! Launch!" The 3 boats, James Caird, Dudley Docker, and Stancomb Wills, hit the water with 28 men aboard. For the first time in 497 days, they were no longer standing on ice. They were in open water. The Southern Ocean, the most violent storm-tossed sea on the planet. "Pull, pull!" Worsley shouted over the wind. Waves crashed over the tiny boats. Icy spray soaked the men to the bone. The temperature was below freezing, and wet clothes meant death. Men bailed frantically while others rowed with everything they had. Killer whales surfaced nearby, their massive black and white bodies rolling through the waves. One nudged the Stancomb Wills, nearly capsizing it. "Keep rowing," Shackleton commanded from the James Caird. "Don't stop!" For 7 days and nights they battled the ocean. Men's hands froze to the oars. Frostbite blackened fingers and toes. Some men drank seawater in their delirium, which only made things worse. They couldn't sleep. One moment of inattention and a wave could flip their boats, killing them all in minutes. "Is that—" someone croaked on the 6th day. Through the spray and mist, a dark shape loomed. Land. The cry went up from all three boats. April 15th, 1916. The three boats scraped onto the beach of Elephant Island. 28 men literally fell out, kissing the rocks, weeping, laughing like madmen. For the first time in 497 days, over 16 months, they were standing on solid ground. "We made it," someone whispered. "We actually made it." But the celebration was short-lived. Elephant Island was barely an island at all, more like a massive rock covered in ice and surrounded by cliffs. Seals barked, penguins waddled. But there was no shelter, no vegetation, nothing but stone and ice and wind that screamed across the landscape like a living thing. Worse, Elephant Island was nowhere near any shipping routes. No one would ever find them here. They'd escaped the ice only to land on one of the most isolated spots on Earth. "Boss, what now?" asked Wilde, his face gaunt with exhaustion. Shackleton looked at his men. They were broken, frostbitten, starving, some showing signs of madness from their ordeal. They'd survived months on the ice and a week in open boats through the worst ocean on the planet. But they needed rescue, and no one was coming. That night, Shackleton gathered his officers. "South Georgia," he said, pointing at Worsley's charts. "The whaling stations, that's our only hope." The men stared at the map in disbelief. South Georgia Island was 800 miles away. 800 miles of the Southern Ocean, the Drake Passage in a 22-foot lifeboat. In April, the beginning of Antarctic winter. It was suicide. "Boss, we can't." "We can," Shackleton interrupted, "and we will. Because if we don't, we all die here." He looked around at his officers, Worsley, the expert navigator, Tom Crean, the tough Irish veteran, carpenter Harry McNish, sailors Timothy McCarthy and John Vincent. "I need 6 men total for the James Caird. The rest stay here with Wilde in command." "I'm coming," Crean said immediately. "As am I," Worsley added. One by one, the crew was selected. Meanwhile, the other 22 men would have to survive on Elephant Island. They used the 2 remaining lifeboats, the Dudley Docker and Stancomb Wills, turning them upside down to create a makeshift shelter they called the Snuggery. Canvas was stretched between them. It was cramped, dark, and reeked of seal blubber, but it was shelter. Wilde would be in charge. Every morning he'd tell the men, "The boss will come today. Roll up your bags, boys. Be ready." April 24, 1916. The James Caird was ready. McNish, the carpenter, had raised the gunwales using wood from the other boats. He'd created a makeshift deck using canvas and sealed it with artist's paint, lamp wick, and seal blood, whatever they had. The 6 men loaded 1 month's worth of supplies. 2 tiny Primus stoves, sleeping bags, navigation instruments. Shackleton looked back at the 22 men on shore, hollow-eyed, desperate, placing all their faith in him. "We'll be back," he promised. "Stay alive." The James Caird pushed off from Elephant Island, her tiny sail catching the wind, and 22 men watched their only hope disappear into the biggest ocean on Earth. The James Caird was 22 feet long, about the size of a large minivan. Into this tiny craft 6 men squeezed with supplies, equipment, and their desperate hope. The boat had only 2 feet of freeboard, the distance from the waterline to the top of the hull. One good wave could swamp them entirely. "Course north by northeast," Shackleton ordered. "We need to clear the ice fields first." Worsley took the helm, his eyes scanning the horizon. As the ship's captain and an expert navigator, the entire journey rested on his ability to guide them through 800 miles of open ocean to an island they couldn't see. No pressure. The first night, the reality set in. The Southern Ocean doesn't play games. Waves 30, 40, 50 feet high rolled toward them like moving mountains. The tiny James Caird climbed each watery cliff, balanced at the top, then plunged down the other side in a stomach-dropping fall. "Bail, bail!" someone screamed. Water crashed over the canvas deck McNish had built, flooding the interior. Men scooped frantically with any container they could find. Their hands were already cracked and bleeding from the cold. Shackleton established a watch system, 3 hours on, 3 hours off. 2 men rowing, 1 steering, 1 bailing, 2 trying to rest in the cramped, soaking interior. Rest. What a joke. The boat pitched and rolled constantly. Everything was wet. The sleeping bags were wet. Their clothes were soaked. The temperature was below freezing. "How are we supposed to sleep like this?" Vincent moaned. "You just do," Crean replied grimly. "Or you die trying." Day 3. The deck! McNish shouted in horror. Ice was forming on the canvas covering. 15 inches thick in places, the ice was accumulating so fast it threatened to capsize the boat. The weight was pulling the James Caird lower in the water. "Chip it off," Shackleton ordered. "Now!" With frozen, bleeding hands, the men took turns crawling onto the ice-coated deck, axes and knives in hand, hacking away the ice. One slip, one wrong move, and they'd fall into the Southern Ocean, dead in minutes from hypothermia. Hack, hack, hack. The ice fought back. It reformed as fast as they could remove it. "This is impossible," McCarthy gasped. "Nothing's impossible," Shackleton replied. "We just haven't succeeded yet." The only warmth came from their tiny Primus stove, which they used every 4 hours to heat a drink called hoosh, a disgusting mixture of dried beef, lard, and oats that was nevertheless keeping them alive. Worsley's navigation was the real miracle. In 17 days at sea, he only managed to get 4 clear sightings of the sun through the clouds on April 26th and May 3rd, 4 and 7. 4 chances to confirm their position. The rest was dead reckoning, keeping the boat pointed in the right direction and hoping for the best. 1 degree off and they'd miss South Georgia entirely, sailing into the Atlantic Ocean to die. May 5, 1916, day 11. The sky was clearing. Shackleton noticed from his position at the tiller. "Look," he called to the men. "The sky." Then he realized that wasn't the sky. "For God's sake, hold on," Shackleton screamed. "It's got us." A rogue wave, a freak of nature, rose behind them like a mountain of water. In 26 years at sea, Shackleton had never seen anything like it. 60, maybe 80 feet high, a wall of green-black water with a white crest that seemed to block out the sky itself. The 6 men grabbed whatever they could, gunnels, ropes, each other. The wave hit. The James Caird was picked up like a toy flung forward in the breaking surf. Water crashed over them, filled the boat, tried to tear them apart. For one eternal moment, the boat was underwater, the men clinging on, lungs burning, sure they were about to die. Then impossibly the boat surfaced. "Bail, bail, bail!" They were alive. The boat was still floating, but they'd taken on massive amounts of water. For the next hour they bailed desperately, throwing water overboard with hands, cups, anything. "We're still here," Worsley said in disbelief. "How are we still here?"
"I'll lend a hope."
May 8, 1916, day 15. "Mountains, I see mountains." Through a break in the clouds, the peaks of South Georgia appeared. Snow-covered, beautiful, impossible. They'd done it. Worsley had navigated them across 800 miles of the most hostile ocean on Earth, and they'd hit their target. The 6 men wanted to celebrate, but they couldn't. Not yet. A hurricane hit. For 2 more days they battled to reach shore. The wind tried to blow them past the island entirely. Reefs threatened to smash the boat to splinters. They couldn't land. The waves would destroy them on the rocks. "I'm so thirsty," Vincent croaked. The water supplies were nearly gone. "We land today," Shackleton declared on May 10th, one way or another. As darkness fell on May 10th, they finally found an opening, King Haakon Bay. The entrance was so narrow they had to pull in the oars. The boat rode a swell through the gap and scraped onto a beach. Solid ground. The 6 men collapsed on the shore, too exhausted to move. They'd been at sea for 17 days. They'd crossed 800 nautical miles. They'd survived storms, ice, waves, and the impossible. But something was wrong. "Boss," Worsley said weakly, "we're on the wrong side of the island." The whaling stations were on the north coast of South Georgia. They'd landed on the south side. And between them and help lay the uncharted, unmapped interior of South Georgia, a wilderness of mountains, glaciers, and frozen peaks that no human had ever crossed. Vincent and McNish were barely conscious. McCarthy was severely weakened. They couldn't sail the battered James Caird around the island. The boat wouldn't survive another journey, and neither would the men. Shackleton looked at the mountains rising into the clouds above them. There was only one option. "We climb," he said. Worsley and Crean stared at him. "Boss, that's suicide. Nobody's ever crossed this island." "Then we'll be the first," Shackleton replied, "because 22 men are counting on us to bring help. And we're not stopping now." May 11 to 18, 1916. For 8 days, the 6 men rested at King Haakon Bay. They upturned the James Caird and created a small shelter they called Peggotty Camp, named after a boat-dwelling character in Charles Dickens's David Copperfield. They ate. They slept. They tried to recover from their 17-day ordeal at sea, but Vincent and McNish were finished. The boat journey had broken them physically. McCarthy was weak too. They could barely walk, let alone climb mountains. "I'll stay with them," McCarthy offered. "You three go." So it was decided. Shackleton, Worsley, and Crean would make the crossing. 32 miles as the crow flies. But they weren't crows. They were three exhausted men with threadbare clothing, worn-out boots, and basically no equipment. "We have a carpenter's adze," Shackleton said, taking inventory. "We'll use it as an ice axe." "What about rope?" Worsley asked. 50 feet, that's all we can carry. Food? 3 days' worth of sledging ration and some biscuits. Maps? None. This interior has never been mapped." The three men looked at each other. They were about to attempt to cross an unknown mountain range in the middle of Antarctic winter with almost no equipment, no map, and no backup plan. "When do we leave?" Crean asked. "Tonight," Shackleton replied. "We travel by night when the snow is frozen hard. We rest during the day." May 19, 1916, 2 a.m. Under a full moon that turned the snow silver, three figures began climbing. Shackleton led, Worsley in the middle, Crean at the rear. Each step was a calculation. Would the snow hold? Was that a crevasse hidden under the surface? They climbed through the darkness, guided only by moonlight and desperation. By dawn, they descended 3,000 feet. From a ridge, they could finally see across the island, and their hearts sank. "That can't be right," Worsley said. Between them and the whaling station at Stromness lay ridge after ridge of mountains, glaciers that stretched for miles, valleys filled with ice. The 32-mile crossing was going to be much, much longer. "We keep moving," Shackleton said. They climbed higher. At one point, they reached what they thought was a summit, only to discover it was a cliff with a sheer drop on the other side. "Back," Shackleton ordered. "We find another route." Hours lost, energy wasted. But there was no choice. Late afternoon, May 19th. The three men stood at the edge of a cliff. Below them, somewhere in the fog, was the valley floor. Above and around them, the mountains were socked in with clouds. The temperature was dropping fast. The Antarctic night was coming. "We need to get down before dark," Shackleton said, "or we freeze to death up here." "How far down is it?" Crean asked, peering into the fog. "I don't know, can't see the bottom." They tried cutting steps in the ice, using the carpenter's adze to hack footholds. After 15 minutes, they'd descended maybe 50 feet. "At this rate, we'll be here till morning," Worsley said. "And we'll be dead." Shackleton looked at the foggy abyss below them. Then he did something completely insane. "We're going to slide down," he announced. "What?" Worsley and Crean stared at him. "Listen. We coil our rope into pads. I sit in front, Worsley behind me with his legs around my waist, Crean behind Worsley. We slide down together." "Boss, we can't even see what's down there. Could be a 1,000-foot drop." "Could be, or could be a nice slope. Either way, we freeze if we stay here." Crean laughed, a slightly crazy sound. "Well, we came here to have an adventure." They sat down, locked their legs around each other. Three men on rope pads at the edge of a foggy abyss. "Ready?" Shackleton asked. "No," Worsley replied. "Good, go." Shackleton pushed off. They accelerated down the slope, shooting through the fog like a human toboggan. Wind screamed past their ears. Snow flew up around them. They couldn't see, couldn't steer, couldn't stop. 1 minute. 2 minutes. The slope began to level out. They slowed. And then finally they stopped. Alive. They descended 1,500 feet in 2 minutes. "That," Crean said, standing up shakily, "was either the bravest or the stupidest thing I've ever done." "Probably both," Shackleton agreed. "But we're down, let's keep moving." May 20, 1916 morning. 36 hours of continuous climbing, sliding, and walking. The three men were beyond exhausted. Their boots were falling apart. Their bodies were using the last reserves of energy. Then Worsley heard it. "Stop," he whispered. "Listen." At 6:30 a.m. from somewhere ahead came a sound. A steam whistle. The whaling station at Stromness signaling the start of the workday. "We're close," Shackleton breathed. "One more push." They descended the final mountains and walked into Stromness at noon on May 20th, 1916. Three figures that barely looked human. Their clothes were in rags. Their faces were blackened with blubber smoke and dirt. Their hair and beards were matted and filthy. They encountered two boys first who ran away screaming. Then they reached the whaling station manager's office. Shackleton knocked. A man answered. The station manager who had hosted them when the Endurance had stopped here 17 months ago. He stared at the three apparitions. "Who are you?" he asked. "My name is Shackleton," came the reply. The manager's face went white. Shackleton? The Endurance expedition? They'd been given up for dead a year ago. "When did you come through Stromness?" the manager asked, confused. "We didn't come through," Shackleton said. "We came over." "Over what?" "The mountains from King Haakon Bay." The manager sat down heavily. What Shackleton was describing was impossible. No one had ever crossed South Georgia's interior. It couldn't be done. But here were three men who'd just done it, in 36 hours, with no equipment, no map, no proper climbing gear. "Do you have baths?" Worsley asked. "We haven't bathed in 18 months. The Norwegians at the whaling station wouldn't let Shackleton or his men help carry the James Caird from King Haakon Bay when they sent a boat to retrieve McNish, Vincent, and McCarthy. It was an honor thing. They wanted to carry the boat themselves as a mark of respect for what these men had accomplished. But Shackleton wasn't celebrating. 22 men were still on Elephant Island. He'd promised to come back. And Ernest Shackleton never broke a promise. May 23, 1916. Shackleton stood on the deck of the Southern Sky, a whaling ship he'd borrowed from the Norwegians. 3 days after reaching Stromness, he was already heading back to Elephant Island. "We can make it, boss," Worsley said beside him. The ice should be breaking up. But when they were 70 miles from Elephant Island, Shackleton's worst fear materialized. "Pack ice, a solid barrier of it. We can't get through," the captain said. "Not without getting trapped ourselves." Shackleton stared at the ice with fury and despair. He'd crossed 800 miles of ocean, climbed impossible mountains, survived everything nature could throw at him, and now he was being stopped 70 miles from his men. "Turn back," he ordered, the words like poison. "We'll find another ship." Attempt 2, June 10, 1916. The Uruguayan government loaned Shackleton a trawler. He tried again. 100 miles from Elephant Island, the pack ice blocked them. Again. "I'm sorry," the captain said. Shackleton returned to the Falkland Islands, where he paced like a caged animal. His men had been on Elephant Island for 2 months now. Were they even still alive? Attempt 3, July 12, 1916. Shackleton found $1,500 in donations and chartered a wooden schooner named Emma. They made it almost to Elephant Island when the ship's engine died. "Can you fix it?" Shackleton asked the engineer. "Not at sea, not in these conditions." 3 months. His men had been stranded for 3 months. Back on Elephant Island, the 22 men were living in hell. Their snuggery, the shelter made from upturned lifeboats, was dark, cramped, and reeked of seal blubber. The floor was a disgusting mess of mud, blood, and waste. Men were packed in so tight they couldn't stretch out. "What day is it?" someone asked in the darkness. "Who cares?" came the reply. They survived on penguins and seals when they could catch them. In winter, the animals were scarce. Men were showing signs of frostbite, scurvy, and madness. "Do you think they made it?" asked one of the scientists. Nobody answered. They all knew the odds. The James Caird crossing the Southern Ocean? Impossible. Crossing South Georgia's mountains? Suicide. The boss was probably dead, and they were all going to die on this frozen rock. But every morning, Frank Wild would shout, "Lash up and stow, boys, the boss may come today." He'd roll up his sleeping bag, pack his kit, stand ready as if rescue was certain. "Wild, they're not coming," someone finally said. "They've been gone 4 months, they're dead." Wild turned, his eyes fierce. Ernest Shackleton gave his word, and when Shackleton gives his word, mountains move. Now pack your kit. The men obeyed. Because what else could they do? Wild's faith was infectious, or maybe it was just madness. But it kept them alive. August 30th, 1916. It was the Chilean government's turn to help. They lent Shackleton a small steel-hulled steamship called the Yelcho, commanded by a brave pilot named Luis Pardo. "Fourth time's the charm," Shackleton said grimly. The Yelcho approached Elephant Island through thick fog. They couldn't see 50 feet ahead. One wrong turn and they'd smash into the rocks. Then through the fog, a dark shape appeared. Elephant Island. And on the beach, tiny black figures moving. "They're alive," Shackleton breathed. "They're alive." The 22 men on shore saw the ship at the same moment. "Ship!" someone screamed. "There's a ship!" Men poured out of the snuggery, slipping on ice, laughing, crying, barely believing their eyes. "It's the boss! It's the boss!" A small boat launched from the Yelcho with Shackleton standing in the bow. As they approached the beach, he cupped his hands and shouted, "Are you all well?" Frank Wilde's voice came back. "All safe." "Thank God," Shackleton said, and there were tears on his weathered face. Within an hour, all 22 men were aboard the Yelcho. They brought nothing but the expedition's records and scientific data. Everything else, the lifeboats that had saved their lives, the snuggery that had sheltered them, stayed behind on Elephant Island. They were going home. August 30th, 1916. The Yelcho steamed away from Elephant Island. 28 men had set sail on the Endurance in December 1914. 28 men were now heading home. Not a single life lost. Think about that. They'd been trapped in ice for 10 months. Their ship had been crushed and sunk. They'd drifted on ice floes for months, sailed through the Southern Ocean in tiny lifeboats, lived on Elephant Island for 4.5 months with no shelter, no supplies, no hope, and yet somehow they all survived. The secret? Leadership. Shackleton had transformed from explorer to savior. When the mission to cross Antarctica failed, his new mission became simple: get every man home alive. He never stopped fighting. 4 rescue attempts, 4 months of trying. He could have given up after the 3rd failure. But he gave his word. The world hailed Shackleton as a hero, though he never completed his crossing of Antarctica. To him, it felt like failure. He hadn't achieved his goal. But history remembers it differently. The Endurance expedition became the gold standard for leadership under impossible circumstances. Business schools study Shackleton's decisions. Leaders read his story for inspiration, because he showed what's possible when you refuse to give up on your people. In 1922, Shackleton died of a heart attack during his final Antarctic expedition. He's buried in South Georgia, the island that saved them all. And in 2022, 106 years after it sank, the wreck of the Endurance was discovered, perfectly preserved 10,000 feet down in the Weddell Sea. The name is still visible on the stern. Endurance.